I don't know if it's Rachel or not, but
Yes. So I see his son over at Low.
Just ran into it like this. Nothing looked to the south of the end of the
Wired line. Like I said, I think run through Rick Ranch or something like that. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting how they synchronize all those cameras and stuff? And
Oh yeah.
you know what they do that for when they do that clicking thing? Yeah, you know what they do it for? They synchronize the sound on, so they hear the click on all the cameras. Yeah.
He didn't have a click.
Huh? Well, he did. He went.
He clapped. He needs to buy a clicker.
any one of them things, huh?
You think with all this he'd buy a clicker?
Take two.
Maybe I'll build him a clicker.
Hold it. I didn't bring my platform.
Oh, he has
We were
one.
just talking about it.
I was hoping for the full effect.
Bring it.
That's all I know.
Yeah, well, at least you knew.
I don't know nothing about anything else.
Okay. After you.
Make sure your phones are on stun. You do it stun. No ringing.
Turned off.
Vibrate.
All right. So we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Very interested to hear what you have to say. As I had said before, I love, if it flies, I love it. And the fact that you all keep those things in the sky and the experiences you've had in doing that, I'm jazzed to hear what you have to say. So is there anything, I guess if I wanted to sort of start that conversation, is I'm a big fan of military aviation. Any stories, experiences, history you have around air traffic control when it comes to military aircraft of any kind? Yes.
I have an interesting one. I was in the military Air Force in Dover Air Force Base, and I was working local control position in the tower. And C5s did touch and goes there all day. And we had C5s, 141s, and it was a transit airport. But anyway, I just had gotten relieved from position with the other guy, so I was still, there you have to wait 2 minutes. And a C5, as it's coming to do a touch and go, hit wind shear, short final, and literally the right wing went all the way to the ground and dug a trench all the way the 13,000-foot runway. Lights are all the wing is popping and everything. And the guy in local was just looking. I said, tell him to stop, clear to land only, because we're like, surely he knows, but just in case. And at the very end of the runway, he put it down like that. And it was like, took out all the lights, everything. It was crazy. Yeah, that was one story. I have so many, but anyway, I'll let someone else talk.
Anyone else? I mean, like I said, there's got to be, I'm sure, a lot of stories.
Well, talking about Dover, we were family. I handled the airspace over Dover. I remember the C5s. And one of my buddies and I were flying down from Long Island to go to NAFIC to see something called the new digitized radar. And we're coming into Atlantic City in a Cessna 172, and the tower tells us they've got a C5 doing an opposite direction touch and go before we touch down. And my buddy's in the left seat. He acknowledges it, and I'm looking at the C5, and he's getting bigger and bigger. And I said to my buddy Warren, have you ever heard of this before? He says, no, but don't worry, they know what they're doing. And I'm sitting there, and he's getting bigger, and I said, Warren, this guy is big. Why don't we do a 360 and let him go by? No, don't worry, they know what they're doing. And in another couple of seconds, I said, Warren, this is not good. Do a 360, let him pass. And the guy does the touch and go and breaks away. And now we turn around and we're coming in, and we got hit with the wake turbulence. And that airplane went up on one wheel, and God was our co-pilot, because we were just ready to be flipped over by that wake turbulence. Finally, we slammed down on three wheels, and I just said to him, taxi to the tower. And I two-stepped it up that tower, got in that cab, and I started the conversation with, not Merry Christmas. What the hell were you guys doing? So yeah, I remember C5s,
What kind of airplane were you in?
172.
Oh my gosh.
Can you just
And
real
I'm-
quick? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm going to say thank you, God, I'm here to talk about it.
I'm curious. I mean, I know what C5. Can you explain what that is for people who are watching may not really know what that kind of plane is? and the size?
C5 is an Air Force transport, one of the biggest in the world. I think the only thing that's bigger, the Russians have one left. Yeah, they lost the other one in the Ukraine.
You can fit a football field inside
Yeah.
a C5. That's how.
Yeah. In basic training in 1969, they took us through a C5 and they had 6 Greyhound buses, 2, 4, 6, and still some room. And the C5 had a big nickname too, didn't it? Which was the what? The Galaxy. Yeah, that's right. Man,
It's a big airplane,
That's huge.
and you got to respect it, especially if he's trying to go opposite direction.
man.
Who's next?
What? Say again.
I said, who's next?
Oh, don't speak.
Stories.
I need to tap. My early FAA career, I was sitting at Stonewall radar. My first 2 sectors, only had those 2 radars. And I'm working, and I've got a line coming into Austin, going to land at Austin. And in that mix was an F4 Phantom. So I've got some 727s. It's probably pretty much what they were sport car type speed as well. But I've got the F4 back behind them, and I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to get him in? And then I thought, he's an F4. So I said Mach 24, whatever his call sign was. I said, give me your best forward speed, please. Got to get you into Bergstrom. And because he was landing there, of course. So everything went fine. He outran everybody, went in, everything was smooth. It was without a hitch. And about 15, 20 minutes later, I'm still sitting there. Somebody comes up behind me and just taps me hard on the shoulder. And I turn around and look, it's our area manager, Tom McGee. The big guy just comes up to me while I'm working radar and assaults me. And he said, did you allow a fighter jet to go supersonic? I said, no. He said, and he looked at me like, and then he walked away. So I keep working. About 5 minutes later, I start thinking, you know what? I did. I didn't know it. And the supervisor said, yeah, go ahead and take a break. When I came back in, the soup sat me down and talked about it. He said, well, apparently you really ruffled up some feathers out there. Broke some chicken coops. Started a stampede with the farmers' cows. He was not too happy about it. I said, yeah, I realized that. And that was one of my mistakes, one of my early learning mistakes. I didn't kill anybody. Nobody got hurt except some chickens. But that stuck with me for a while, and as far as I know, I never did that again.
And they really weren't chickens though, because they stayed there and took it. And you know the tornadoes that went through the recently, a week or so ago, there were 80,000 chickens in a chicken farm in Mississippi, and it tore up the big barns, but the chickens all went back and stayed right where they were, because it's on, you can find on news, YouTube. Yeah,
It's a chicken survival instinct, I guess. Yes.
what
Chickens or
came
rooster?
first, the chicken or survival? I
Or
don't
the F4.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, who's next? Dana.
Well, I'm mic'd up. I have something in a similar vein, although I didn't have to approve it. The Blue Angels have a waiver. You can't fly below 10,000 feet above 250 knots.
Right.
Unless you have a waiver, permission from the government, whatever. So the Blue Angels have a waiver. They can fly below 10,000 feet, above 250 knots, if they're coming in what a procedure is called a rapid recovery. And so I'm at NAS Pensacola. It's a weekend. Number 5 and 6 went out to practice their solo stuff. And I've got about 4 or 5 in the pattern. They're just doing touch and goes. We even have an LSO on the field who's out there working because NAS Pensacola is a training base. So they're out there practicing. I get a call from approach, says Blue Angels inbound with rapid recovery. And when they call me with that, I have to take my pattern, which is at 1,000 feet, take them up to 2,000 feet and circle the field till the Blue Angels come in, because they're going to come in at about 800 feet between 400 and 450 knots. And you don't have to keep the pattern up very long because they come in really fast. So there's a little scud layer up there, and these guys are really griping and carrying on, and they're not happy that they're having to circle while the Blues come in. And then somebody keyed up and said, "Way to go, Blues." And then the next thing coming in was, "Watch this, boys." So I'm turn around, and here come two A4s, 450 knots, upside down.
Oh my God.
And they came in and landed. We brought the pattern back down, but that was fun to see.
For anyone who's just starting to watch this type of genre, can you explain who or what are the Blue Angels?
Blue Angels are the Navy flight demonstration team. They fly F-18s now, but when I was in the Navy, they flew A4s, which is a little jet compared to the F-18, which is
And representing the Air Force.
the new Top Gun jet.
Representing the Air Force has the Thunderbirds, and they fly, I think, F-16 still.
Right. The #1 U.S. flight demonstration.
Is the Blue Angels.
By the
Blue
way,
Angels, right.
I didn't want to say it. That goes without saying.
No.
Next to the Army. Next to the Army.
Yeah, the Golden Knights, huh?
Yeah, they jump out of planes.
Both of those are the best of the best.
That reminds me of another experience. Bill Smeda and I went to Ellington one day on, I forget what it was, some kind of little trip, and the Thunderbirds were there. I think the air show was going to be that weekend. That's probably why we were out there. But they were parked on the other side, and we had met the chief of Ellington Towers. She was cute little thing. She ended up working for the FAA at I-90. I forget her name. But anyway, we said, "Wow, Thunderbirds out there." She said, "Yeah, you want to go see them?" I said, "Yeah, can we go out there?" I said, "Yeah, you're cleared to go out there and walk across the runway and everything." Across the runway, went out there. There's 6 Thunderbirds sitting out there in line. And Bill and I are just walking around them. We're not touching anything. We're just looking at them. We're just in that phase, that great phase. The Thunderbirds are right here, right next to us, and we're walking at them. Well, next thing we know, there's a little golf cart tootling across the runway towards us, and there's a guy driving. We look, and he says, "Hey, come here." So we went over there, and he said, "Y'all can't be over here." We said, "Okay. Well, we've seen them anyway." And he says, "Y'all got to get back over there." And he starts to drive away. I said, "Hey, can we have a ride?" So he says, "Yeah, I guess. Hop on the back." So Bill and I are standing on the back of that golf cart. He's going back across the runway. And he says, "Who are y'all with anyway?" We said, "The FAA." And he stopped. And he said, "Well, I guess you can be out there, can't you?" He said, "You want me to take you back?" And I said, "No, we're good. Thanks anyway." So the FAA was a fun place to work. You never knew what kind of opportunities were going to arise, and it's just a fun place to go. I always felt sorry for the 1 or 2 people in a facility that were not comfortable working traffic and knowing they had to come to work every day and do that stuff. But the vast majority of us enjoyed it. We loved it. We worked well together most of the time, and great job, great life.
Yeah, you bet.
I'm curious, you're talking about military aircraft, these jets are extremely fast, but they're sharing airspace with, commercial or otherwise. So when it comes to, I don't know how that works, you've got, say, cargo, commercial, or there's commercial jet, and then maybe something smaller, and how do you mix that up? I mean, you can't necessarily, I don't know, just bring them in one right after another. How does that work?
Dana.
Dana, why are you gonna bring Dana?
Well, Dana. Well, of course we got
Okay.
a super. You're following a super. What is 6 miles radar separation?
Yeah, we got a separation.
And then you got
for
all
that.
kinds of stuff.
So at PDK, which we had 4 flight schools, you know, which I like. A lot of times, student pilots will come over and say, "Hey, I'm a stupid pilot," and I say, "I know." So, you know, and but we did. We had our jets coming in. PDK had a lot of celebrities, just like Hobby, will fly in there. So I got to.
That's Peachtree
Peachtree
DeKalb?
DeKalb. Peachtree DeKalb in Chamblee, Georgia, where I worked there for about 4 years. And so when we had our student pilots, as well as, you know, Cessnas and little Pipers coming in and everything else, so we know we had our jets come in and got to get them off the runway. So we have our reduced separation, 3 miles on some of them. And yeah, that's very interesting because a lot of times when I had a Cessna come in and she wanted to do a touch and go. So she actually did several touch and goes and kind of went like towards a ravine. I said, verify this is a full stop landing after this. She said, nope, I'm gonna try it again. And she flies over. So to me, working with student pilots was the way to get rid of all of them. I said, wait a minute, I'm new, I'm not too good at this. And they said, we're departing the area. And that was my story for them. We're departing. It was just to get them back in because, yes, working with when they have low hours really made a difference. But also I worked at ZHU, so I found out that Robert Reese used to do aerobics.
Bob Reese was
Yes.
an aerobics instructor.
Yes, instructor. Yeah.
Where
At ZHU. I just found that out
Yeah.
from another controller.
Rob's back over there right
Yeah, he's hiding now.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, you need to watch the video where Bob, Robert, our good friend, and he tells a story about one time at Houston Center, he challenged a guy to the mile run, and it's on the channel. And it is funny.
Kyle Nichols.
Yeah, it is a funny
Okay.
story. Yeah, it's a funny story.
I gotta see that.
Bob challenged him to a 1 mile run around the track, and they all went out there. You gotta watch it.
I gotta watch that. KK told me, he said, hey, make sure you let him know that he did. I said, oh, I didn't know that. So now I'll definitely bring that up. So that's why he's in shape.
But we had like, well, there's different separation standards. If you have horizontal entrail separation, there could be 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles. I think is the furthest. Okay, and it depends on the weight of the aircraft. Yeah. So,
Also,
go ahead.
I was going to say it's rare that you're going to be mixing military fighters with commercial aircraft. You know, for the most part, you don't have a lot of airports with. I mean, it does happen, but the only place I can think of when I was at Andrews, but they had 2 runways. So any of the military fighters or whatever, we used them on the right runway, and where everything else was on the left. But it's very seldom you have fighters in commercial aircraft that you're mixing.
Well, when I was at, several places, but when I was at Corpus, right west of our airspace was Navy Kingsville.
Okay.
So all of their planes would come in,
and
do their practice approaches at Corpus. And it was kind of funny because when there's a new flight school, you know, either from new pilots from the Navy or we had flight schools at Corpus, you know, part of your briefing was like, it's a new, there's a new class coming out. But yeah, you learn to now actually the radar scopes are so more advanced than they were before. They have a little thing, like we're talking about weight turbulence. The separation is 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, miles, but so it'll be like a green bat between this plane and that plane. That means, you know, everything's good to go. Usually you have to, when you work radar, you use speed control. So we control the aircraft speed. So, you know, like for instance, 5 miles apart and 170 knots each will get you to the runway at 3 mile separation, which is the requirement. So you can do, and then, so, you know, but when it's a windy day, that instead of 5 miles, you need like 7 because it's windy, you know, they're into the wind. And so you every day when you get up, you have to look at what the weather is. What's the winds aloft? And is it a headwind, crosswind? Because when you're trying to separate planes and you turn one base and the next one base, literally the one with the wind will pick up 50, 60 knots. And the one against the wind is going to lose 50, 60 knots. So now you have to calculate. So you're constantly in your mind calculating mileage, the wind, the altitude, you know, and then the compression factor. So yeah, they started with, so part of your briefing too is like 5 miles will give you, 170, give you 3 miles. But then tomorrow when it's windy, your briefing is 7 miles, will get you 3 miles on final. So, it's very difficult. But when I was at Corpus, we mixed military with, civilian aircraft. When I was at Waco, there was Hood Army Airfield. So you put the Army helicopters mixed in. So when I worked there too, Hobby, you have Ellington in the airspace, so you mix in there too. So the ones that I work at, with, you did mix. Even when I was in the military, I was at Honduras and Spain. So you had the Spaniards or the Hondurans mixed with the American pilots. And in the tower at Honduras, we had to coordinate with the Honduran air traffic controllers on whose plane was first. Like, my plane's first. No, my plane's first. It was kind of funny, though. And then in Spain, the same thing. You had 2 local controllers, a Spaniard and an Air Force controller. And we had to coordinate our planes. And, of course, we're in their country, so they wanted to be first. But we're like, look, that guy's 10 miles out. This one will fit. And then sometimes you had to go, let me just watch. But, that's, my experience.
I think it's time to break for control. We're going to do a little commercial spot. What live show isn't good that doesn't have a good commercial? These are our new T-shirts. They'll be online. $22.50 for subscribers, $25 for non-subscribers. Please, you'll see the order button on there in about another week. So hurry up and get your shirts.
Awesome.
All right.
And as requested, Jack.
My 2.
Your turn.
And my banker's over there. I got it. Hey, thank you. And I may be in for 2 more. I'll talk to you afterwards. Awesome, man.
Thank you for explaining that. How was the language barrier over there?
And hey,
Did it make a big difference?
Well, in order to go to Honduras or to Spain, they called it in the Air Force the Spanish Mafia, because you had to know Spanish. And you actually got language pay, which was extra $100 or something, whatever it was back then, to be there, because we had to coordinate in Spanish. So, but when we got shorthanded during one of the wars, they didn't have enough, so then they put you in a team. Like, I would be a team with a non-Spanish speaker. So when it came to coordinating, I'd do the coordinating, and he would work the traffic. So those are the 2 ways, that we did it, yeah.
Can I ask a question right quick?
Please.
Tim, do you know when the Blue Angels were founded?
1946.
It was a long time ago. Well, and I guess the Thunderbirds were around the same time. Because I was about 6 years old the first time I saw a flight demonstration team, and it was in Miami, Florida. And there was a Blue Angel, not the Blue Angels, Thunderbirds. And I think they had F-somethings, like maybe 86s, F-86s. But I remember they had different color smoke coming out the back, well, not smoke, whatever they do to whatever. But anyway, that was in 1956, Joe.
1956. A couple years before I was born, but yeah.
2 years before.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, as I'm hearing you talking, whether I'm thinking that now commercial aircraft, you've got 767s, bigger planes, and then you've got those smaller express planes, which I just love flying in. They're really small, Embraers and all that. And
CRJs.
so you have to, from what I understand, you have to do that yourself. Okay, this is what the separation needs to be, airspeed needs to be. I think that's amazing, sort of doing that on the fly. Is that how it works? So, I'd love for you to explain what that means when you're looking at flights coming in.
Well,
You can explain right here on the separation and how we have our cheat sheets and everything else.
Well, we do have cheat sheets, but the en route environment, which I'm more familiar with, jets are jets. Basically, if I'm handing them off to Intercontinental or to the Tracon, I've got to cross a certain fix at a certain altitude at a certain speed. Now, whether it's what we call a Barbie jet, that's your express jet type, or whether it's a 767 or whatever, they're going to have to be crossing out there, say at 10 or 12 or whatever they're crossing at these days, and at a certain speed that we hand them off. And sometimes that becomes difficult to manage because some of the airplanes are not going nearly as quickly as the other airplanes are going. I did have one occurrence many years ago where we needed to cross Lissy because there was an Ellington field lander that had to cross the same intersection on the southwest side of the Tracon. I believe it was 10 and 250 knots. If you were landing Ellington or at Hobby, you had to cross at 10 and 250. Well, I had a T-38 behind another jet. The T-38 was just eating him up. And I gave him a 360. And then I look back down and he's still eating him up. And I say to the jet, to whoever it was, it's probably a NASA pilot or one of the trainers out of the T-38 here. And I asked him, did you give me a 360? He said, yeah, we did that. And I said, okay, turn right, heading zeros, you know, whatever. So I just had to give him a box turn to just get the spacing. But yeah, that's where we encounter most of the difficulty with the speeds or a mixed environment. I mean, of course, we're climbing and descending all the time, but really that's the biggest headache, I think, is handing off to approach control or to another sector facility.
Yeah, and I worked at I-90 also, and so Center would hand us the planes, and so they have this descend via that they start on when we call it a push. So when all the aircraft come from different parts of the United States, they're coming in high and fast. But as soon as we have to blend the aircraft, we have to slow them to 250, and then on the downwind traffic, we slow them to 210 knots so we could blend them. So what you do is you use altitude. So as we're turning base with an aircraft on the downwind, we're turning base, we'll say turn right, hit 180, reduce speed to 210. So he's turning and slowing. And the aircraft on a straight in at 250 knots, we wait. It's kind of like when you're on a highway and you're braking when you're approaching the air, but the controller has to work your speed. So then if he's, say, 10 miles behind the aircraft that's 210 knots on, now you turn on final, and 250, and you want to put a plane in the middle, which is on the opposite downwind, is you turn the other aircraft north, heading 360 and 210 knots. And the other one, as soon as he's 10 miles behind the first one, you slow him to 210. So now you have 3 aircraft at 210, 5 miles apart. And then as they get closer, you have to reduce them even more because they're going to land and descend. So then we start at 250, 210, 190, 180, 170, 150. The slowest we give is reduce the final approach speed. So the entire time you're watching the speeds and what the wind's doing. Like I said, if someone you're turning into the wind is going to slow. The one that's being pushed by the wind is going faster. So you use altitude until they're all on final, and then they're perfectly lined. And at I-90, since we're one of the large Tracons, one of the busiest too, you have to, every mile counts. So if you have an extra mile here, and a 30-mile final, you could have fit in like 4 more planes. And that they'll be telling you, you push it till it's like a perfection, like a greased wheel working perfectly. You have to it's like a balance. It's hard to do, but once you get the hang of it, your timing has to be precise.
And I-90 is the biggest airport's George Bush Intercontinental Airport. Yeah.
Right. And we have a George. Normally when we work over Lake Charles and we cross them at throw that maintain 10,000 and then reduce speed to 250 knots. And generally that works for us when we get in there. And then when they give them to I-90, like she said, they're working the speeds. And they try to give us, not jam us up, but in the tower, we make it happen. When they give it to us and they got to overtake, we take care of it all and get it going. Not to say that we save the day, but we do. We save the day when we get them. Because like she said, sometimes it's hard to win and everything else. So when we get them, we're like, hey, we're going to reduce you a little bit more and make it work.
Well, Dana, now at certain, like the minimum would be like 3 miles of trail, but at a certain point, like
we can reduce
inside the final approach fix, you can go down to 2.5.
Exactly, 2.5.
Is it still 2.5?
We can do it. We can get down to 2.5. We try to make it work for them. If we got to put them on runway 26 right, or if we can keep them on 26 left, that's what we do.
Do you have the type aircraft displayed in your data block that's following the target?
Yeah, we have that, and we have also our little cheat sheets that we have on the side to help us out with everything else. And if all fails, we go around.
When you have the aircraft type, it also has like a slant, and then like a H is a heavy.
Yeah,
so you know, okay, an H with an I is this many miles. An A with a A is this many miles. So after each aircraft, you'll have A, B, C, D, E. You know, so you work your calculation on mileage based on the last character in their aircraft suffix.
And are you still active controlling traffic? Or you
I retired 2 years ago.
You have 2 years left?
She retired 2 years
She
ago.
retired 2 years ago. I lost my hearing about 10 years ago. I'm just kidding. But no, okay, great.
But yeah. And then
you,
with the
Jane, are you
helicopters,
retired?
She retired too.
yeah, I've been retired now about 10 years, but working with, you're talking about spacing, the helicopters, you know, basically 500 lateral and longitudinal, but working with a lot of our helicopters, we love it. When they come over, good thing we can say, hold your position.
Right.
And that's what we like about it. You know, we got a separation right there when we hold our position. And he worked with Bob Spratlin. You want to say something? Tell me.
Yeah, well, for those of y'all don't know, I'm Daniel Flores. I flew in the Army, flew the Apache helicopter in the Army. I also flew for Customs, and now Customs Border Protection, the Citation jet as an interceptor, and the A-Star helicopter, law enforcement, actually here in Houston quite a bit, actually all over the country. And then currently I'm flying the EMS helicopter here in the Houston area. And so yes, air traffic control worked with us. As you said, they made it happen. They perform miracles for us here in Houston when, whenever it always seems the bad guys know to do their exchanges or whatever. It happens to be right on the departure end of one of the Intercontinental or Hobby. And the clouds are normally at 3,000 feet, so I've got to stay below that, and we got to get the camera in position to film whatever bad things they're doing to take it to court. And also, I found it very, very helpful to call approach on the phone and say, hey, this is Omaha. That'll be my call sign. It'll be A-Star helicopter. We're going to be off the departure end of Intercontinental on the south side here in about 30 minutes. Doing a drug deal, so kind of giving you a deal. And like you were saying, so if the push is happening at that time, yeah, then you guys really make it work for us then, because you're having those Airbuses, the 737s and everybody going above and below us, turning away from us and all, while I'm sitting at a hover, trying to get the footage and whatever. And as one time that happened here, just in 2019, one of my last deals, we were following these cartel guys all over Houston, just in your hair all day long over Houston, until right around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had to get gas, so we went to Hooks, landed. We told the agents on the ground. They had followed the guy back to just on the right between Hobby and Intercontinental in the VFR corridor. Right there where 610 and 59 come together. Now the deal on that was the house was raided the day before. We got quite a number, several thousand keys of cocaine and a lot of money. When the bad guys were in jail, we had a phone tap, and we found out that they were the ones that were not arrested were talking that, hey, did anybody get back to the house, because there's still a lot of money left and a lot of cocaine left in the secret compartment, in the secret place in the house and all. We need to get back there and get it before Customs, DEA, whoever goes back there and does a full search of the house and such. So that's why we're following these guys, because they were going to head back to the house and get it. So anyway, they ended up back towards the house. We ended up going to Hooks to get gas, and sure enough, right as we're there at Hooks, they are telling us on the radio, we're hearing the agents say, like, they just came out of the house, they're in their car, they're headed out. And so I get on the radio and said, hey guys, do you need Omaha back up in the air? They said, no, we've got it blocked at the end of the street. It should be no problem. And thinking, bad guys never do what you want. So we start walking faster to the helicopter, and sure enough, we hear him say, like, he got around us, he's headed to 610. And we're like, damn it. So, you guys need us? And they go, no, we got him. We're going to stop him on the on 610, headed west towards I-45. And so by now we're running to the helicopter, we're jumping in, getting it started, and all. We can hear him on the radio. They're saying, like, he's 610 west, headed towards 290 now. He's past I-45. And we're like, oh man. all right, Omaha's in the air. And then we got with Hook's Tower saying, hey, we need an Omaha launch right now, straight south, an immediate launch. And they're like, all right, everybody, stop, circle, whatever. We take off to the south. We get them on the radio. They're saying they're now turning outbound on 290. And so I'm like, all right, I can catch them if I do an intercept on my own. I get with Houston Tower, 127.3, and said, hey, guys, I'm going to be in your airspace for right now, but I don't know where this is going to head. So just give me a squawk, and I'll do my best to let you know where we're going. And sure enough, getting up to Pinemont at 290, and I can see them, the cars, I mean, they're hooking it. They're doing over 100 miles an hour in traffic, and this was on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So Zorch over him, come back around. 2 DPS cop cars are also trying to keep up with them, weaving in and out of traffic. They're headed to the Beltway 8. And I'm like, all right, Omaha's got it. He's outbound 290 coming up these 2 miles from Beltway 8. Hang on, he's about to turn. Is he going to get off on the Beltway or whatever? So I'm saying all this on the radio. And the guy gets off. I didn't know you could get off 290 and get back on underneath the Beltway 8. And that's what he did. And I'm like, he's off. No, he's not. He's back on. He's back on. He's back on. Wait. He's back off now at the FM 529 exit. He jumps off the ramp there. And I'm going, all right, he's off the ramp there, 529. Traffic is backed up at the light. You guys, you're going to get him here at the light. Hang on. He's dumped the car. He's gotten on the median. He's jumped out of the car. The car is rolling through the intersection. And the one guy's jumped. He's running underneath 290 to the south side. I'm like, all right, he's running on the south side there. Hang on, we'll catch him on the other side. And then I hear Tower saying like, Omaha, you're on the wrong freak. I'm like, so switch my control over, and I hear some airline guy saying like, "Get them, boys! Leave them on the leave you on the freak so we can hear what happens." Yeah. Like, so we follow the guy. He runs inside actually a warehouse, an air conditioning warehouse there, and it's actually really funny because then DPS sends their helicopter because they're wondering who the hell is this unmarked helicopter circling at 100 feet and all that. But anyway, yeah, it was just kind of funny that everybody heard what was going on.
And in a way, that was a good thing because, you know, as air traffic, especially in the tower environment, we do work with HPD and the medics and air vac and all that, and we do what we can. So like
Absolutely.
you said, they were moving around. I believe Carl Hernandez was working you. He did get an award, and you know, for that, because he definitely moving jets around that have to land, and United, you know, they run Bush. So, you know, that's one thing that I love about FAA as far as working together.
Yes.
And working with student pilots. I was working in Waco, and we had a young lady, she just got her shirt torn, and she got airborne, and then we just had weather move in. And just to bring them back down and get them through the clouds and get them on the ground, that to me is rewarding. You know, you get to see the people, you know. It's not like when you're in the center and you don't really get to see, you know, face to face once they land. So that's rewarding for me. And
yeah, that's the other thing I found out over the years. Like I said, 21 years I flew CBP here in the Houston area and such, is I found out after a while that when the chase was over, whether it was in the jet chasing somebody and landing and all that, get back up on the radio or on the telephone, I'd give you guys a call and tell you like, yeah, we got 1,000 keys of coke, or we got 5 arrested. One of them was a known murderer and such. And yeah, I found out later that you guys really appreciate that. That like, yeah, all that work we did with you and all that, and then you're gone off the freak you're out of our airspace, and then they come back later and tell you like, this is what we got. Thanks to you, you guys helped us get all this drugs or these people off the streets, and that way it gives you a closure.
yeah, it gives us a lot of feedback, and we like to hear that, you know, because at the end of the day, we are human, we do what we have to do, and we all remember how we all got affected during the crash for Kobe Bryant, and that affected all of us, not just the people in California, and everybody that heard the tapes were, took you back. You know, so it makes a difference. And I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Nassau
Work at
here.
DCA Tower too.
That's where I retired from.
And Andrews.
Yeah, yes, Andrew.
Well,
St. Louis.
how many do you want to hear? The one you told, I do remember. I can't remember what sector or anything. Sort of doesn't matter. But working one of the air carriers, you know, and it was fairly not busy. And all of a sudden, this guy clicks the mic. He says, "Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for flying American Airlines such and such and such. We're going to be flying at the altitude of 35,000 feet, and it's going to take 2 hours." He goes on and on and on and on, He goes, like the whole spiel. And he finally gets done with it and says, "Yeah, that sounded pretty good. Why don't you tell your passengers now?" Right? Yeah. And then somebody else mentioned the supersonic. Like we used to work all those F4s out of Bergstrom, and they had a couple of routes. They had one that was an IR route that went, I don't know, from West Alano out to Junction and came back. It was all like below 4,000 feet or something like that. And they would pop out of that, request a clearance. They're called PEG flights. They called that because they were when they got done, they're gonna peg it. So anyway, so they came. These were approved routes, and they'd come out. They request recovery, and they would go from somewhere south of Junction to a fix called Briggs out northwest of Austin, where there was a high altitude precision approach in at Bergstrom. So they'd come out, request that route. You'd clear them. They'd go up like 18,000 feet, and they would peg it. I mean, they would. You'd watch it, man. They would go. I mean, our scope only went to 990 mile an hour, and they were beyond that. Well, everybody was, probably varying degrees of happiness with that. One guy that was not amused one day with that was the mayor of the city of Fredericksburg. I mean, he had a sonic boom that happened like in his yard or in his house or something like that. He wasn't. It might have been. I mean, but those supersonic flights, they did that reasonably frequently until that one day, that when it affected that mayor and he didn't like it, and he got a hold of some congressmen and all that, and they put a stop to it, and so those were no more. But it was kind of fun while it lasted, because we used to like to kind of watch the speed and like. We'd bet like $1 or whatever on how fast the guy was going to end up going. But they get to hauling. I mean,
I just thought of something about 2 hours ago, and I remembered it just a second ago. I just remembered it. When I was a controller here at Ellington Field, I was on my way to work at the GCA unit was out in the middle, and we used to go down to the south end, and they had a light there, green light, red light, and the tower cab could see you, and they knew you were going around there. They would give you a green light so you could cross into the overrun of the runway. And I was on my way to work, and I was across the overrun of the runway, and it's about 400 overcast ceiling, and all of a sudden I had a red light. And out of the base of the clouds, an F-102 came out and was well left of course. I mean, way over, and did one of these numbers. And also, one of the neatest things working at GCA, precision approach, radar approach, was an AV-8. Because I was working, the first time I ever worked one of that, it's like, golly, is this a helicopter or what? Because they really slowed it down, which was really, AV-8's Harrier, vertical takeoff and landing capability. But didn't they have VFR helicopter routes in Houston, approach airspace? Like I think, for example, I rode one time in a helicopter, Department of Public Safety there off of West Road and 290, and I think the north side of 290, you went one direction. On the south side, you went the other. I think on the right side, the south side, you'd go eastbound. Yeah. So helicopters were VFR, where they were separated by highway routes, and they were visually see them and fly on what side. That's kind of interesting to me.
Quick question, guys. For any younger audience that may be watching, was there any prior knowledge that was needed other than just solely being interested, or did you guys just hop into it? The aviation profession or FAA?
What was the question again? I didn't quite hear the question.
I got hired off the street after a lot of urging from my mother to take the test. This was after the strike, of course. I was teaching school, realized I wasn't going to make much money for the rest of my life doing that. And it was time to make a move, and so she bugged me and bugged me and bugged me. And I finally did it and took the test in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah. And didn't know what I'd made. I thought I did okay, but you don't know until you know. And so afterwards they gave us our dream sheet, which allows us to pick the 3 places we would like to work, and they'll try to work it out. This was way back then when you had some choices. And one of the guys that took the test with us, he said, well, my dad's a supervisor at Atlanta Center, and he said, no, but they're not hiring anyone who made less than a 95. I'm like, well, I don't know what I made. And he said, So I picked Dallas Tower, New Orleans Tower, and Houston Tower. So I'm teaching school in Georgia, and I'm in the middle of a class, and one of the office runners comes up to me and says, Mr. Whiten, you've got a phone call. And I said, do I need to take it? He said, well, it's from the FFA. I said, okay, yeah, I think I need to take that one. So I got the teacher across the hall to watch my class. I went down there, and Dot Gibson was on the phone.
Dot.
Everybody knows Dot.
Everybody knows Dot.
And she said, Mr. Whiten, Houston Center wants to hire you. Do you want the job? I said, yes, ma'am. I said, what's a center? No idea. I was just like most people who think air traffic control is that tower that you see when you go by the airport. But it couldn't have been a better thing. I would have enjoyed the tower, I'm sure, just as much as I enjoyed the center. But I enjoyed the center greatly. There were like 325 controllers there, so there wasn't a shortage of friends. Even if you were hard to be friends with, there were enough people that would hang around you. We had a guy named Pierre. I wish he'd come out here and talk. He would entertain everybody. But he was working with a trainee who I had just certified the day before on his first 2 radars. And Pierre was working the D side. This was in the old control room. And the trainee was working, and I just happened to walk down there. I wanted to keep a close eye on it, because like I said, he just got his certification the day before. I walked up and I looked, and I saw a data block of a little puddle jumper, which is a little private little airplane, Cessna maybe, Comanche or Cherokee, landing in San Antonio. And then one of the cargo carriers behind him, DC-10, maybe a FedEx, was coming in. And he was above him, of course. I was hoping. But I looked at it, and I think the trainee had a J-ring, which is a 5-mile ring around it, just to give you an idea of how close the planes are. But they're in line. The FedEx is coming from behind it, and that's a fast jet, 3-engine jet, the DC-10, and a little single-engine prop. Single-engine prop's got to cross the fix at 9,000 feet. And the FedEx has to cross it at 10,000 feet going into your San Antonio approach. Well, I looked, and the little puddle jumper was maybe out of 13,000 or going through 13,000, slowly making his way down to 9,000. And the FedEx was now right on the 5-mile ring, and his altitude showed triple X'd. Now, to tell you what triple X means, it means he's descending so fast that the computer cannot keep up with his rate of descent. So I saw that and I said, what altitude is that FedEx at? And the controller said, I don't know. And I'm rethinking my choices of checking him out the day before immediately at that point. I said, stop him at 14,000 feet. And so he called on and said, FedEx is mean your altitude maintaining 14,000 feet. And I can't tell you what the FedEx told him, but they did it, and we got it in. And afterwards, I just walked up to Pierre and looked at him like, What were you looking at? Because I had put Pierre down there because Pierre knows he was a great controller. He was a cut-up, but he was a great controller, and I knew he wouldn't let anything happen. But a lapse of concentration, I guess, occurred, and well, we avoided something that day. So everything works out. Air traffic is very safe. It's very entertaining. It can be very stressful, especially when the weather moves in. And you move all the traffic around to go around the weather, and then that weather moves right back up there, and then you have to move them all around again.
Hey, Frank.
We've all been there.
Yeah, go ahead. Can you describe for Joe and Nicole what the XXX meant on the day?
30.
Huh?
30.
Yeah,
Roman numeral.
Yeah, triple X in the altitude readout. It's called Mode C. That's what they use for altitude readout, and it's very accurate. It tells us exactly what altitude they're at throughout their flight. If you give them a descent or a climb, it changes pretty quickly as it changes. But if you give a guy a descent and the altitude shows XXX, that means that he is descending so quickly that the computer cannot keep up with it, so it just goes blank on his altitude, says your guess is as good as mine.
And in the radar environment, we have a data block. It'll have so-and-so on the call sign, and it'll have the assigned altitude, like Frank was talking about there. So in this case, he's crossing Limig, which is the south, right? Crossing Limig at 10,000. So 10,000 is put, or 100 is put in the data block, and then there's a slash on the other side of it. It shows what the altitude
actually
is, or vice versa. I can't remember. It's been a while since I worked. So they're one side or the other of the slash.
You got it right.
So you can say 10,000 is what he's assigned, and what is his altitude now? 15.6, 15.5,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. What Frank is saying, he's got 10,000 over, he's got a slash, he's got XXX. Means he's going so fast, he's descending so quickly that the computer can't catch up with it. And so that's what alerted Frank to that point. But that's the tool we have that you can kind of monitor what's going on. Conversely, with the fellow that's descending into 9,000, the controller could look over there and say, well, he's got 9,000 at his assigned altitude, but he's at 13.5 or whatever that altitude was. Hey, you need to get down. So instead of giving them a crossing restriction, you just go ahead and give them a descent clearance. A crossing restriction is kind of, what do they call it again? They say pilot discretion. And so, they're just going to float in. But if you need them down, you have to go ahead and send them down.
And by the way, on initial contact at an air traffic control facility, like with an approach control facility, and an approach control facility to an en route facility, they would check on and give their altitude, and then you verify their mode C. Right. You know that it's accurate. You can look at your data block.
Yeah, and speaking of you were asking about any training, we do have CTI courses where you can go get a 2-year degree in air traffic. And just like him, I'm also street, and my mother had me take the test, all of us, and she was the first female air traffic controller. It started back through a historian, FAA, checked it out and let her know. She didn't find out until she's in the 80s. She got certified in Anchorage, Alaska.
Your mother?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
What year did she go in the FAA?
She was with FAA. She used to be a clerical clerk back in 1966, I'm sorry. And then she got into air traffic. She would have got in earlier, but her boss said, you're the best clerk I ever had. So he held on to her paperwork. Yeah. But yeah, she's certified in Anchorage, Alaska. So I was a special student of the day when they put her in the newspaper. And so, but I got into air traffic. I was a boat controller and used to have to keep up with barges coming up. And one guy said, hey, we got 21 barges coming up the Missouri River. And I would check in, write that down. And one day, one guy said, I got 2. He said, the tide's low. And I'm like, he can't make it 2. You got 2 barrels? That's what I thought a barge was. So yeah, I didn't know. I thought until they said, Dana, what is a barge? I said, it's a big old barrel, right? He said, no, we're going to take you down there for you can see what a barge. When I saw a barge, my first time in my life at 30 years old, I'm like, my God, how do you ever get there with 2 of them? I never saw a barge. But anyway, that's why I got in air traffic. I think I did better than that than a boat controller.
Well, Dana, do you know roughly what year your mother entered the FAA as a controller?
Yeah, as a controller, she certified in 71, I know that, but she was in training. And After that, she worked with, you remember Steve Maxwell in Lake Charles? Okay. Steve was one of her employees when she was in Alaska, and then she went to Puerto Rico, and I'm sure you remember Dave, her dad. Yep. Dave, her dad, was one of her employees in Puerto Rico. He said, Danny, she took me from being, he said, man, I was just kind of a bad boy, and now here I am, And then from there, she worked in Washington and Atlanta and all over other places.
And then what year did you enter the FAA?
I came in right after the strike, a little bit. I know you're trying to get my age.
So when your mother took the FAA Air Traffic Control applicant test, she took the old aptitude test, which had all these boxes unfolded and what they would look like when they came together. They had sequences of symbols and
everything.
And you did the same test too, didn't you, Nate?
I
think so.
I took the test back in, it was in the 80s, because I got picked up in 85, in December of 85, when I became in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah.
And she did a lot. I know even on her certification, she said she had everything. I think it was like whatever they had, people unholding, people on the top need to get down, and she said everything you can possibly think was in her.
The reason I asked is Steve was telling a story about when he took the test, he prepared for the aptitude test that preceded the one that was in effect, and it was quite a surprise.
Yes.
Well, I went down to the bookstore, and they had a book. It was called the ARCO Study Guide.
Yeah. Was this one?
Air Traffic Control.
Yes.
82 or 83.
I've used it.
And so they had an ARCO study guide. It didn't do any good. I mean, you went through it, and so I was learning all this stuff. I had no clue what they were talking about, because, I didn't know what a controller was. I'd been on an airplane maybe once in my life, but, so anyway, I go in and do the study guide, and I look through it and everything, and I thought, well, that's okay, maybe I'll get it, and maybe I won't. So I go down and take the test, and we open it up, and it starts out, and it's like a spider web, right? If you remember, it was like you had A, B, C, D, E, F, and they had this plane's going this way to this way to this way. Now, what's going to be the confliction, right? So there were 4 parts of it. The first part, you had X amount of time to do it, like 15 or 20 minutes to do each one, to determine where the conflictions were at, or what you needed to do to move somebody out of that confliction. The first one, I said, this is ridiculous. And it took, I didn't even finish it. I didn't get all of it done. Yeah. But after that, I said, okay, it's okay. I did okay on the next 3. But after that, it was like SAT tests. I mean, there was that spatial reasoning you were talking about. And then the last part of it, it was air traffic knowledge test, right?
Yeah.
And so they would ask you things, and the one on that one, they told us that, now don't answer it if you don't know. Don't guess on these, because it starts counting off. You remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
So, if they go in and say, what's a Vortec? Well, let's say it's a Chevy, put that out in 62. Well, you don't want to answer it that way, exactly. So, but anyway, so it turned out, and I made 93, I think, on the test. Yeah. And I hired in Atlanta Center. That's where I started.
Well, I think I know we were just talking about, we took the ARCO test. Tim, I'll call it the ARCO test. ARCO. Did you take that too, Tim?
No, I took the one in 80. It was in 84 after the strike.
Okay. Chris, did you take?
I did use that book.
Yeah.
My dad started a flight service station in '64, and he was an FPL at Fairbanks Tower in '66.
Oh, Alaska, there you go.
Yeah. So I did 4 years in the Air Force, and then I got out. And my dad was a manager in Detroit at the time, so he was teaching. He was having classes with the ARCO, trying to get prospective controllers.
Right.
And it helped a lot of folks pass the test and get into the FAA. He did a lot for a lot of folks. But I got hired in '79, and after tech school, I was at Bi-State Parks, which is a GA airport in St. Louis. Very busy back then. Yes. I remember my first day, a guy ran about 120 operations in an hour. Man, I ain't gonna be able to do this, but I did. But I got checked out, and then I think about a month before checked out, there was a strike. And so I got caught up in that, got fired in the strike, and went back in the Air Force, did another 5, 15 months out in Abilene at Dias. And then I went to the Philippines for 4 years. got out again, and thanks to Bill Clinton, I got rehired in '97 in the Bay Area. Went to Vegas, went to DC, went to Houston for a bit, and then went back to DC. And
So you were at DCA Tower.
yeah, DCA Tower.
I have a question about the strike, and not about who was there during the strike. It's more about relationships. You've got all of you, center and air traffic and tower and all that, and then you establish relationships, I have to imagine, with pilots, etc., right? And then you have the strike come along, and then back again. Was there a difference, I guess, in that? You know, because I mean, I'm assuming that you've probably talked to pilots regularly that you've seen before, and what are relationships like when it comes to air traffic control, pilots, other centers?
I once had a work at a DCA and a brickyard land at Delta, Mercury or something like that. Anyway, he said, "Hey, Tower, I got a question." I thought he was going to have a complaint. And he says to me, "Did you ever work in California, Palo Alto?" I said, "Yeah, 10 years ago." He said, "I've been flying there forever, and I finally recognize your voice."
That's kind of like Fred's story. Fred was at New York Center, and then when he went to the academy and came to Houston Center, he was working out there west of San Antonio. A flight of 4 F-4s took off, and the lead was, I think, the squadron commander in this particular flight of 4. Do y'all remember that story? And the guy said, "Man, I recognize your voice." And Fred's got a very distinctive voice. He said, "You ever work out in the East Coast?" "Yeah, New York Center." And this guy flew A7s or something out there when Fred was out there. It was interesting. The guy recognized Fred's voice.
Yeah, and another thing that the FAA, well, it used to be more frequent. They called familiarization flights. So it used to be 9 that the controllers had. Now it's different. But so we got to fly in the cockpit with the pilots. So we flew in the cockpit. That way we could see what they're doing. Because sometimes we give them an instruction and they don't answer right away. You know, we're like, "What are you doing?" You know, like sometimes, you know, because it's a timing thing. You know, when you're air traffic, everything has to have, you know, precise. And so if he doesn't answer and you're trying to turn him, put him between 2 planes, there goes that spot that he had. Now he lost his spot. Now you have to recover. Adjust the speeds of the 2 aircraft, take him to the end of the line, you know. So we would learn what they were doing, you know, so we could, that's what happens at this point, all the way to landing, which was very interesting. And then the pilots, they always come into the take-ons, towers, and also they come to see what we're doing. Because sometimes, same thing, they don't realize that we have combined areas and we're working 20 frequencies. So they're like, "Why aren't you answering me?" And I'm like, "Oh, here," you know. Or sometimes when we're talking about a stuck mic, when someone has a stuck mic, you cannot transmit to your aircraft. They're all going and going and going until somehow that pilot recognizes he has a stuck mic. We do have an emergency frequency that we try to see if he's monitoring emergency, and it's like, unstick your mic because it's stuck. But it's very helpful. They always come to do tours where we work, and we do tours. Now after 9/11, because of the incident in the cockpit, you know, they've made it more difficult, you know, as far as the familiarization flights, but they still have them, which is good. Yeah.
I got a small world story I want to tell, and you know, good thing about FAA for me in my career, and the fact I'd been in the Air Force, that I ran across so many people that I had worked with or known since I was 18. And you know, I retired from DCA, but about 3 months prior to retiring, I flew to Tampa, went to Lakeland Tower, which was a contract tower, as a possibility of getting a job when I retired. So I walk in, there's 2 guys, one guy named Larry, and I introduced myself, Rodney Ship. Larry kept saying, "Rodney Ship, Rodney Ship." He said, "Man, I know that name from somewhere." And I said, "Well, I don't remember any Larry." So I don't know why I told this story. 41 years prior, while in Oklahoma City, we were on a class outing with our instructor. Our instructor's name was Buck. Buck had worked at O'Hare. I don't know if he had burned out or what. But anyway, we're in this class outing, and someone put out a joint, a marijuana joint. I don't know if it was Buck, but anyway, I'm holding this thing, and Buck says to me, "Ship, are you going to pass it or are you going to smoke it?" So Larry says, "Were you hired out of the Great Lakes region?" I said, "Yeah." He was there. That's why he kept saying he knew who I was. I probably passed him the joint, for that matter.
We were going to ask.
Yeah, I didn't inhale. I passed it. My hero.
You know, Joe, the question you asked about, do we know pilots? I think nearly 100% of the pilots that you know are ones that are in your neighborhood or you've met them, you know, in some situation where you're friends. But as far as on the radios and ATC, it's almost nil, almost zero that you're going to end up talking to somebody that you know. Yeah. And they're not going to recognize you.
Unless it's Arnold Palmer.
There's some pilots that I do recognize. They recognize my voice when I was talking. And I just couldn't imagine. There's one guy who was my neighbor. He flew for United, and he would, every time when I was working in Lake Charles when I was at ZHU, he goes, Dana, and I say, Wade. You know, I don't know how he can remember, but working at the tower and working with and getting, like she said, familiar with the pilots. So quite a few of the United pilots that would fly all the time during the push or the landing, I would know who they would know me, know my voice. So they'll say little things, you know, this is United 285 Heavy. And I'm like, that's Xavier, because he's always had that voice like he is the man, you know. And then we had one pilot, he'd always say, this is Cornbread. So I would know who that was. That was Leo, because he was taking a trip to New York. So it's kind of, you know, when you're in the tower, like you said, you don't really know all of them, but they know your voice, you know.
Yeah.
And one day we were working and Brickyard came over and the guy had a really, really deep voice. And so it was all women in the tower that day in Intercontinental. And I'm like, ladies, you got to hear this man's voice. So I said, I need you to switch over to ground. He's like, I'm airborne, I understand. I need to come up with ground frequency. And so she goes, all right, this is ground. And she goes, God, he's got a beautiful voice. So then we passed him to the tower. We kind of passed him around. Yeah, we did. We passed him around. And then he came back and cleared him to land. And then just right when he got ready to leave, go, we love you. You know? But so we do have fun. We, you know, and that's a good interaction with them. And but yeah, he had a really nice voice.
Yeah. I believe you.
Hey, by the way, I'm gonna throw this out in case you might want some information. I was trying to find my ATC application test score, and so I couldn't find it anywhere. And I took it in 1974, July. So I found out, I called up to it turns out the National Archives Records Administration, I got an email address they gave me, you can actually write them an email and they will get back to you within 7 to 10 days if they can find what you're looking for. So I don't know that they're gonna find that, but I will tell you this, because my precious wife's sitting over there. She found it she knew up in the attic there was a box, because I've been looking for a decade. I would like to find out what I made on the test, okay? So she found it just a couple of days ago and showed me, and by the way, I told Tony Sanchez, we were talking about, what'd you make in the test? I said, man, I think I made 110. But I didn't make 110. Shree actually found my original that they mailed to our apartment where we were living in 1974. I'll show you afterwards.
So can I get the email from you?
You bet.
So they'll give you your whole FAA.
Well, I don't know. I don't even know if what you have to do is you have to write your name, your social security, and blah blah blah, and you just, it's a short bit of information. You tell them what you want, and I said I'm looking for my civil service entrance exam aptitude test for applying for an air traffic controller position.
Right.
And they said, well, we can get back to you. You know, the guy told me on the phone we should be able to find it. So I don't know, but I'll let you, I'll hook up with you.
I'm trying to see if I can get my dad's service record.
Oh, man, that'd be awesome. They also have a military records thing that you, because I'm working on a story I was telling Joe, but I'm working on an SR-71 story, because I recently spoke with two pilots that are still, one of them's got the most operational hours in an SR-71. He's got over 1,000. And anyway, and I'm also working on a story about two men that I worked with at FAA, what is it, FAA, right? FAA headquarters in 1985 and 1986. And the guy that sat 2 seats over from me was a B-17 pilot in World War II. When I was 35 when I got there, and there were 3 people in the International Procedures branch, and Larry Billow was one of them, and he was a B-17 pilot. 1 seat over from him in a cubicle in a window seat was a Tuskegee Airman named Span Watson.
Oh.
And both those men were so humble, and you wouldn't even know that unless somebody told you. And I've got the thing all ready to go. I'm gonna tell a story about each. They both were very nice to me, and they mentored a lot of people. But I'll tell you right now, one thing I asked Span, because I talked to him in 2008 on the phone. He passed away in 2010. He was 92. He'd be 109 this year if he was alive. And Span was in the first combat mission of Tuskegee Airmen in World War II over the Mediterranean Sea. Wow. Air to air, dogfighting with the German Air Force fighters. Span, I asked him in 2008, we were talking about, Span, man, how do you stay so young? He said, I got a great team of doctors. And he was just a fine gentleman. And then Larry Billow, when I found out, somebody told me he was a B-17 pilot, I was talking to him one day. I said, what's your most memorable thing? What's the greatest thing that you remember about being a B-17 pilot? And he said, when they had a food drop into Holland, B-17s for 8 days were dropping food because the people were starving. So they flew the B-17s over low level. They opened up their bomb bay doors and would drop parachutes with food in the pastures, and people would be down there waiting. And he flew 2 missions on May 3rd, 1945 and May 5th, 1945. In a B-17, he was a captain, pilot, and quite a guy. And he would be 105 this year if he was still alive.
Wow, that is so interesting. You just brought that up. And when you're talking about working with pilots, I still work with Southwest and United with the kids and everything else, and we come out here quite often. But the Tuskegee Airmen, C. Alfred Anderson, my mother had received his award, and he was the red-tailed pilot that flew Eleanor Roosevelt around to show that they could fly. And so I met him back in 1992. I believe he passed in 96, and he like you said, life. He was a dancer. My mom kept saying, go dance with the chief. I'm like, I don't want to dance with that old man. Mommy, keep dancing. She said, I'll go back out there and dance with the chief. So now I'm thankful that she did tell me to dance with the chief, But like you mentioned, and meeting some of the former Tuskegee Airmen that, when they opened up a new school, I believe, not too long ago, it was great, like you said, knowing the pilots and especially the Tuskegee Airmen. That's an honor.
Yeah. I remember Dana, I also met her mother, and it was so impressive. It was sad to say when she passed away, part of the funeral was in a hangar like this big. I think it was even bigger, and it was full of people.
Wow.
People flew in from Alaska, from all over the world, and everybody who was who's who was there. And I was like, wow, they were all were there for her funeral. It was by College Station, remember?
Yeah, it was in College Station. I think they had a national meeting. What was that? What was the national meeting they had? They had every morning.
Taps.
They had some kind of meeting. But anyway, a lot of people didn't know that was my mother. It wasn't like something we put out. And they were doing their briefing, and then one of the secretary, Linda, had called me and said, Dana, did you say your mother was a controller? I said, yes. She said, did you say your mother had brain cancer? And I said, yes. And so she said, we didn't know that was your mom. They were on there today, and they had the telecon, and for 45 minutes all they did to talk about your mother.
Wow.
So, she would eat and breathe FAA. And I was like, Mom, do not give me an FAA sweatshirt ever again. I don't want one. Not for Christmas, not for my birthday. Good.
But look what you're wearing.
I know, right? You're wrong for that.
Yeah, I am.
Hey, a little tidbit about Tuskegee Airmen. Not a single B-17 was lost when they escorted them in World War II. Quite an accomplishment.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
In fact, it got to the point where all the B-17 crews were saying, nope, We want them.
Yes, that's correct.
We want them to escort. They
That's
were in the
right.
P-51 Mustangs. I was not there. I'm just repeating.
Something you saw, huh?
All right, another thing, I didn't know that there were cheat books for the test.
It wasn't cheap.
Test.
I'm telling you right
It didn't
now,
help,
that
right?
it didn't help at all.
Okay.
I mean, there was nothing in there that was on the test.
Well, I feel a little better then about that.
Yeah.
Except the stuff like vortex.
Right.
But I didn't remember all that stuff.
Right. Okay.
I didn't answer.
The academy. Let's talk about the academy.
There we go. Now we're talking.
That was the most stressful thing I've ever been through in my entire life. I remember calling my mother, who had recommended me to take the test to begin with, one day before a graded problem, said, "Mom, I don't think I can take this. I am stressed out." And she said, "Son, you can handle anything. You're good at that stuff. You just keep doing." So anyway, I did. But one of the things I remember the most, we started the graded problems. All right, that's near the end of the academy. You either make it or you don't. First problem, I made a 70 something. That was a passing grade. 70 sounds, but 70 was good.
Wow.
My roommate made a 43 on his first one. So we're riding back to our apartment after work. He's in the floorboard in a fetal position. I'm driving the car kind of like this, looking at him saying to myself, I don't think he's going to make it. The next day, the roles were reversed. I made the 40-something. He made an 80-something. So I'm in the floorboard. And it was like that all the way through the academy. They were trying their best to wash us out.
How long was the academy?
3 months.
It was longer for.
A little more, I think.
It was 6 months for us.
And one of the first things they told us in the auditorium, day one, was, look to the person to your left, look to the person to your right. 2 of y'all won't be here when this is over. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty accurate. It was about 50-50 as far as losses go.
How many was in your class in center?
How many?
How many in your class?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember.
We had 28 in our class, and there was another class that had 28, and half that class was coming to Houston, and half of that class was going to Albuquerque. So I did the math, 17% of us passed.
17%, wow.
Got to Houston Center, and then once we got to, there were 7 of us out of 28, and 14, do the math, whatever that is. 7 of us made it, and we got to Houston Center, only 5 of us made it to all the way.
And they'd mess with you in other ways too. Our instructor told us that on the last day, after we've taken the final exam, after all your graded problems, one exam, I needed a 68 to pass the academy. I figured I could do that. I did. But the instructor told us, okay, on the last day, I'm going to have everybody stand up. I'll have the certificates. If I walk by and shake your hand, you made it. If I walk by you, I'm sorry. So he got up, everybody stood up, he walks about 50-50 all the way around. He hands Steve the certificate, and I'm like, and then I start smiling. He looks at me and walks right by.
For 2?
I said, hey!
Okay.
And he turned around and said, I just kidding.
What's the biggest?
And handed me my certificate. I probably wet my pants when he did that. But it was well worth it. What an experience that was. And then once you got to the facility, like Tim said, you trained there as well.
Awesome.
It's a more relaxed
Let me see that extra large.
atmosphere.
You see?
And,
I'll send you some good pictures.
I think I was in a terminal class, and I think
Online download.
terminal was easier. Because center guys, you had so much more to remember, maps and all that stuff. But out of my class of 36, 20 of us made it.
Yeah.
6 of us were ex-military controllers, so all of us made it. But I think I did on my 6, because we did non-radar. And my 6, I got an 81,
Shree,
57,
that fit
41,
wouldn't it?
an 89, and 2 98s.
Now, Maddie.
And so they went by your score, high score to low score, and they put all the facilities that are available.
Female about that.
And so they went by the high score and gets to pick first.
5.
And I had a 70.22.
Okay.
So I picked
I'll buy the
last.
large.
And
I'm
so
gonna
he
buy
said,
a
we're going to start with Gary and we're going to finish with Rodney. Is there any questions? I said, yes. When is payday?
Oh, yeah.
But Frank mentioned the training at the academy, and you know, if you run into anyone on the street that's not familiar with air traffic control, first thing I was say, isn't that a very stressful job? And I got to say that, honestly, except for that 3.5 months we were in Oklahoma City, I never found it to be that stressful.
Yeah.
Only
But
man-
3.5 months was absolute nightmare. It was a nightmare. And I mean, there's days that you work that the weather was not cooperating, that the pilots weren't cooperating, that nothing was going right, but still it was less stressful to me than going through that academy. I always said that the academy was a psycho thing. They were just trying to figure it out. And then I used to make jokes about that too. I said, all these guys in here working, Jack's not here now, but I said, they all, we all failed, and they put us in this building just to keep us off the streets, because we didn't make it.
Yeah.
But that was a very, very stressful. I know that after the first problem, it was just a practice problem.
For American.
And then it was just all non-radar, and all you had was a strip.
She just entered her 4th year.
And you went through it, and it's non-radar and a strip.
They-
And I just bombed the first practice. It was a practice problem. Didn't count for anything.
Yeah.
And it was on the evening shift because we're working shifts.
That's your second daughter.
I go outside,
March.
and I actually cried. I said, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
And as a matter of
Because I had a good job.
I think Frank and
And I said, did you just throw it all away? But you just have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and say, I'm gonna make it. And it was tough though. It was very, very tough.
the one that went in
a
the army.
special kind of person, I think,
Yeah.
to be air traffic controller. Because like when in the academy too, when you start off with, like say throw out a number out there, 100 or whatever,
they said, yeah.
by the time you graduate. So some people, I remember the first weekend, this one guy's like, you mean we're going to work holidays and weekends? It's not like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's like, no. And in my 34 years as an air traffic controller, in all the places I've been, I think I was home for maybe 2 Christmases. Like that's it. Like your work, because that's when everybody flies on the holidays. So that's when we're the most busiest. So we're working, but then also you go through like when you're going to the academy, when it's all simulated. But when someone crashes 2 planes and they're like, "You mean I could, if I make that mistake in real, I just killed hundreds of people?" And they just like, "I'm out." They just couldn't handle that. And then other people, when 2 are about to hit,
I told them about it.
they actually go into shock and then they can't talk.
And I told them
They're
about
like.
that.
They freeze.
Katie graduated.
So you cannot freeze. In a moment of stress, when you have pilots crashing or in an emergency weather, like he said, sometimes there's nowhere to go. So as a radar controller, you literally have to call the tower in the center. It's like stop all arrivals, stop all departures, because the air is saturated with aircraft, kind of like when you work in the highway and there's detours. So planes everywhere because there's weather and there's detour. And you just have to, maneuver everyone wherever you can, and to make it safe. And then you could say, so people don't understand when they're like, it's an air traffic delay. They'll try to say it's a delay for safety.
So you say he can't hear the
not everybody can go into this cloud. So then you have to go around, and it's severe. You got wind shear, you got lightning strikes.
Okay.
In the middle of a rush, you'll have an emergency. Whether it's a person dying on the flight or the pilot itself.
These camera guys,
everything that you have to just snap and keep going. You work in an emergency aircraft that's crashed, but you still have all the other aircraft on
After our lunch break,
as shocked as you are. You have to keep going until someone relieves you so you can go de-stress.
That's awesome.
So some people, when they encounter
when we get
that,
home to College
they're
Station
just like,
this afternoon, will these be available on the channel that we can actually watch?
Curious question, because what I learned in this process was the different flight rules,
Like the news,
etc. And
like
the
you'll see it
VFR
live, but it ain't
really
actually
interests me because the
Yeah.
first time it was explained to me, it's like it gets switched over to the tower, I guess, right? And then it's just all.
Oh, that's all right.
It's just visual. I mean, you're looking at what
But
you
get it on
need
tape
to
so
do
we'll
to
go
bring
look
that
at you.
aircraft in.
Oh, that's good.
And to me, I thought, wow, that's amazing because you're.
Huh?
It's sort of in.
Yeah,
it's out of radar and it's in your hand physically,
make it look
in a
good.
sense. And so I'm just curious about what that might mean to you and what that was like, if any, what your experiences or anything might be in that.
Well, most VFR towers
my
that I
wife's
worked
real
at anyway
overfield.
had we had radar in the tower as well, called bright radars. It
tell
goes
you,
out
this-
so many miles. So you use both, but VFR is visual tower, but we did have radar to help
But I once worked at Dave Wayne Hooks, and you have 17 right, 17 left, and 17 water, which is a water runway. So we'd have pilots doing a little circle for the water runway, helicopters doing, onto the ground. They would do their maneuvers, and then you have aircraft circling for 17 left,
And that audio's
aircraft
good.
doing touching those 17 right. So like you said, you're here, looking this way, looking that way. You have to make sure that plane's not overtaking the one in the front.
So the
So you
guy
do
that's got
maneuvers
right in the
like,
middle with the
turn
white
20
shirt
degrees
and
right, so he can
sits
make a
between the
wide
guy on the left and
downwind,
the
so he
woman on the
doesn't
right.
catch up to the
I noticed
aircraft
he
in
was
front
holding
of
the
him.
microphone
You have
down.
pilots
I guess
that,
all came
when you
clear.
talk to this guy, this pilot, the other pilot thinks you're talking to
Yeah,
him,
yeah.
and he takes the turn for another aircraft, and then you
those
have
are-
to adjust.
Y'all-
You know,
y'all-
I was like, no,
all
not
this
you. It was this one, but it
Yeah,
happened.
it's
So now you
great
gotta
stuff,
quickly
man.
think of an adjustment.
Well, believe it or not, this is
turn your.
dated.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like what that must be like.
They're smaller now.
Yeah, it is.
To me, that's very fascinating.
It works,
Part of
so you can't complain.
Physical, like I said, physical, visual.
It gives them the perfect, because there's only so many things.
It's kind of hard to believe,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
older than these guys.
About
And I came through, I
I
know,
was
hard
like,
to
Robbie,
believe.
Yeah.
And I came
Heck, you
through
said-
the academy
you see
in
me, I'm
70.
back and forth.
Good news
Yeah,
was it was
yeah.
1970, not 1870.
He goes, well,
And I was in New York,
oh, yeah, we can.
and in Oklahoma City,
They benefit,
it's
Rob
very
benefits.
prone to tornadoes.
Well,
in
our
the springtime.
granddaughter at Sam Houston, when they
And
got their white
tornadoes were
coats,
touching down.
they called it the white
They would
coat
take all
ceremony.
the classes.
I took my little
We'd have to go down
G7
in the
Panasonic,
tunnels.
put it on a tripod,
And we were in
I
New York class, and we had
recorded every
instructor
student that
from
went up there
Denver,
and got it. And then I sent that to
one
the dean of
from
the nursing school.
Albuquerque.
I forget his name now, but
and this
I
was
said,
a
hey,
class
look,
in New York as
you
we
can,
were driving.
I got this where you can download it,
And now
and you
tornadoes
can do
are
whatever
touching
you
down,
want
so
to.
we
You
go
can-
down in the tunnel.
It's yours to have, and,
you know, we're
I put a
joking
title
around,
of
we're
every
talking,
person
we're
when
waiting
they
for
came
it
up.
to be
They
all clear.
see the white coat. I
There's
put their
another
names
class
underneath
there
there.
from Salt
Yeah.
Lake.
And I was telling them
And
about the
one
white coat
class
ceremony, and I
there
streamed.
from
Well, I
Albuquerque.
didn't stream it, but I actually recorded
all
it.
of a
Gave
sudden,
it
these
in the
guys
file. Yeah, it was.
started walking out. They said
and I
they're not
think
going to be stuck in the
Maybe
tunnel with these
4K,
guys
I
from
don't
New York.
remember.
They
This
got to
was
get away
G7.
from us, and started going out.
So we're
All right.
streaming at 10
10 years later, I come back
Yeah,
as
yeah.
an instructor
cameras themselves. So
after working in
Oh,
New
yeah,
York.
we're getting a
And
4K signal.
as I set up my class and my list of
Freddie's
instructors,
talking.
I had one of my assistant instructors was my lead when I came through in 1970. And as I made up my list
What
for
time
the
is it?
grading labs and stuff, I told my other instructors there'll be
One-
times
Do
when
you know what?
it may seem like this guy's getting
Because he's
favoritism,
got some other people.
and he is, because I owe him.
I heard he was going to try
And he helped me get through back in 70, and here it was years later. I wish I could find him now. Maybe he'll see this
Hey,
this video sometime.
Rob,
His name was
is it-
Joe Rab
You got.
from Denver.
Hey, thank you.
And,
You okay?
like
You,
this.
yeah. Hey, are you okay with?
Talking about instructors helping you out. I ran a problem. It was a graded problem. So you walk in with the pink strips. Were they pink or red?
Hey, what?
They're pink. You walk in with pink strips. And I did the one thing you should never do on a graded problem. I put a guy on an arc.
I don't know if you heard me telling some of these guys.
An arc is you have distance measuring equipment, and you make them stay at 12 miles in a circle.
My sciences were good. I was like, you know, you get
and then go in
I had a hard time.
12 miles this, and then you go. So he stays at 12 miles.
Hey,
It's cardinal rule. Don't put them on an arc in a graded problem. If you want to play with it in a practice problem, that's fine. But I didn't see. Obviously, I didn't see any other way out. So I put a guy on an arc. And after it was over, we had this one instructor. When you're done with a strip, an airplane, you pull. They're on a strip of paper and on a little holder on a board. You pull it down, and he yells, "Put your deadwood back!" So I put it all back. And he's looking at it, and he's looking at it, and he goes, "Dick's your lead, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Hold on a minute." So he runs out and gets my instructor. Dick walks in, I look up, and I don't know what the hell's going on. And they put their heads together, and all of a sudden they go, "Okay." And we walked out the door. I said, "What was that?" And he goes,
Well, you know
He
what?
didn't know if it was good, and he goes, Tim, I don't even know if it was good, but you passed it. And I said, thanks, Dick. I appreciate it.
You have I think you may have a relative.
I have no idea.
Who does that?
But he said, don't do that again.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Both instructors, neither one could tell if I hit anybody on that arc. They tried. They must have talked 10 minutes, and they decided we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If he was got the balls to put a guy on an arc, we're gonna let him pass. So
He must know what he's doing.
yeah, he must know what he's doing. Yeah, we know that. It sounded good. So
Oh yeah,
I had an instructor help me out too. I owe him.
Yeah, yeah. We'll make sure.
Got me in trouble.
I did not.
Okay, so what you shouldn't do. This kind of goes back to flying a little bit.
Jerry Strickland signed it. Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember a guy named Sky King. You're old enough.
TV show. Yeah, I remember TV show.
And if you're not old enough to remember that, that was one of my heroes growing up.
Yeah,
I mean,
Cessna 310, right?
oh yeah, and so. Man,
The one I saw,
I mean, the storyline
like
was
the
about
old
as hokey as
with
it
the bombs
gets,
on the end.
and
Golly.
it was very
sponsored by
probable,
Nabisco.
but that looked really cool to me when I was
The original.
Hey, Danny, this is my wife's
you
Rio.
know, if I ever
JT.
get old enough to
Yeah, this is my
pack
wife's
that away in
Rio.
the back of my mind, I want to do something like that.
Oh, honey, I put the socks over there.
And sure enough, like, later on, in
Yeah,
All I know,
That's 18.
went out and got my pilot.
She knows I've
license.
said
I
this
thought,
a number
well,
of times.
Anyway, so that
Women are
did
superior
give
to
me a
men.
little bit of background. It did help up there at the center.
Sky King
on
alone.
my
Wait,
check
that-
ride at
that-
the
that was early 60s, wasn't it?
for flying. You know, I'd done the flying part.
I'm trying to remember
already passed
the
written,
show was in the early 60s.
And I remember I had
maybe
to take
late
this
50s.
check ride with this guy that was, this guy was an old Marine. You know, he was about as a dog-faced Marine as they come. I quickly learned he was more bark than he was bite, but he barked a lot. And so he starts asking me these questions. He said, all right, he'd ask such and such as, all right, well, what's the minimum visibility outside of a control zone, 2,000 feet. Okay, and so, well, you have to have 1 mile visibility, free of the clouds, and going through all that kind of stuff. And I got through all of that. That was the last question. He kind of looked down his sunglasses at me like this. He says, boy, he says, don't you ever do that. And that was it. That was kind of the same thing. Don't ever use an arc.
Yeah. Right. Don't ever do that.
Don't use an arc, whatever you do. But I remember getting up to the academy. I was in one of the first classes right after this flight. And here we are, man. In like January, it was January 1983. It was snowing, and they put us up in. Oh man, these accommodations. I mean, it wasn't the Ritz. I mean, that is for sure. But it was. I quickly learned it. Man, you better find some friends that know a little bit about this, and because you're not gonna get through it by yourself. And so, I found a study group that most of us kind of made it through. But yeah, it was definitely stressful. And you knew, and every graded problem was like, man, you're doing this problem for your job, sort of. So I think that was sort of the point, man. It was like a 3-month stress fest. So anyway.
Yeah, it was stressful. And one of the things they told us that first day in the auditorium was 2 out of 3 of you won't make it. And if you're 30 years old today, you won't make it at all. Well, I was 2 weeks from turning 30. So I kind of fidgeted when he said that. And
I was 30 and a half.
And the guy next to me looked at me like, well, I guess you're one of the ones that won't be here. So it was very stressful. One of the things, two things, military fam trips. We got to go fly military aircraft, and it was part of the ATC training manual. It was so we could get the pilot's perspective, which would help us in our careers as controllers. So we got to go fly all kinds of military aircraft. I remember Kyle, who had the race and won against Bob. He and I used to go to the Chandelier Islands south of New Orleans every year and go fishing. And the F-15s would come over and just come really low and just blow right by, but you wouldn't see them coming. You'd hear them after they've passed you, and then you go run out of the big boat and look, and now they're climbing back up again. And we're like, man, that would be so cool. Well, it turns out we got to do that. We got to fly in those F-15s out of New Orleans. It was a great experience. I threw up 3 times in my flights. There were other flights that we flew. You know, you never knew if you were going to get sick or not. We had one controller, Fred Velasquez. He said he had a stomach of a goat, and he never threw up. He never had a problem with it. But that was some of the greatest times. And the FAA not only allowed it, they encouraged it for us to do that.
I had
something else. It'll come back to me.
I had a fam once, Delta 72, and operations wrote my paperwork. They had me as an inspector. And I didn't pay attention. I got on board and captain, inspector. I said, oh, no, I'm just a controller. A little later, a captain trying to deadhead wanted the jump seat, comes on and he had attitude, wanted me out so he could sit in there. Captain says, nah, he's an inspector. You're going to have to go in the back. I said, thank you, Captain.
I took a fam trip one time, and we were just about to close the cockpit door. All of a sudden, this guy walks in, and I'm in a 727, or 737, I believe. The guy walks in. I'm not sitting in the seat yet because it goes across the cockpit door. But the guy walks in. He's dressed casually. He's got a badge on, I think. And he points at me and says, "You, out." And so we know we're low on the scale when it comes to fam trips, and pilots get first. Turns out this guy was a pilot. Didn't know that at the time. But when he said, "You, out," the pilot turned around and looked at him and said, "No. You get off my GD plane." Told him to get off. And I'm like, holy cow, what have I gotten in the middle of? And so that guy stammered off, got off the plane. We took off. I'm being quiet. I don't know what to say. As soon as we get out of 10,000 feet, the pilot turns around and says, that guy was a scab. So I threw him off. Well, I started thinking about that. Yeah. I'm a scab too. That came in after the strike.
Wow.
So, I didn't mention anything, and he didn't ask me when I hired on, and it was a great flight. Went to North Carolina for the weekend. Coming back, I'm like, what are the chances? Getting to the terminal near my gate. There's that same pilot that got booted off the plane. He's obviously waiting for this flight too. It was a flight with 2 jump seats, and we flew side by side all the way back to Houston.
Oh, man.
And it was very uncomfortable. And I asked him something, you know, while we were just after liftoff, and he said, "This is a sterile environment. You cannot talk below 10,000 feet." And he was right. I didn't know that, but I learned it that day.
I went on a fam trip when I was in the military, stationed at Dover Air Force Base on a C-5. And as we're in the C-5, we're in the pattern, all of a sudden they get a call, "We need to go, you need to refuel, you need to go here." And I'm like, well, it was me and another person in the Air Force, and I'm like, "Are you dropping us off?" They're like, "Nope." Okay, well, now we're on a mission. And when we go, they're going to refuel. I'm like, well, can we at least go check out the refuel? So we did. I got between both pilots and watched as the boom was coming down. And it's a very dangerous procedure, too, you know, because you're in there in Centers Airspace. But so I'm here taking a little picture, taking it. So I still have those are probably the coolest pictures I have on the fam flight. And then luckily we came back 4 hours later, because when we were on our way, we had to go somewhere to New York. They had a touchdown. I don't even know what happened. Then we had to fly back, and we were back in time for me to go pick up my son at the daycare at 6 at night. He was the last one. Poor thing, he was crying. So that was interesting on that fam flight I had. Oh, another one. I'll tell you one more. My sister lived in Mexico, so I fammed to Mexico City. Well, it's funny because when I flew there, it was, you know, everything was great. But on the way back, the pilot's, okay, we're non-radar, so just help us look out the window in case you see something, And I'm like, okay, and we're going to take a shortcut. I'm like, no, you cannot take a shortcut on non-radar. They're planning time and distance. Radar, we see them, but literally they had to call them shrimp boats. You kind of do time and distance for them, but you just cut through the airspace and you could hit another plane. So now I'm really looking out the window. And then when I landed, they treated me like royalty. It was pretty funny, but that was the scary part when they took a shortcut in on radar. Just.
So they teach y'all how to handle unusual situations in the academy, and I say this because we were in the citation jet with Customs. We were the target aircraft for 2 F-16s that were covering the Crawford, Texas, the George Bush deal, and this was in, I want to say, 2004-ish, and all of a sudden we're on the Houston approaches radio, and all of a sudden we hear this, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday! Oh my God, my student just jumped.
Oh.
Y'all remember that?
I do.
Yeah, and we're like, wow, this is interesting. And so the approach controller goes like, all right, who are you? Where are you? And what happened? He goes like, oh my God, I'm over here. He was just by Waller, Texas, northwest of Houston.
It wasn't long ago, right?
It's 2004-ish.
Okay.
And he had
Time
somewhere in there. And the guy had, he goes, was he, so what happened? Whatever. He's like, oh my God, he just jumped out. And he's going like, okay, was he wearing a parachute? No, he wasn't. No. He goes, all right, are you okay? Can you land? He goes like, oh, I don't know, and all this. So it was the guy that he was on the news like several days prior that he was arrested here in the NASA area for having a laptop that had NASA stuff on it. And he had explained that he purchased that laptop used from somebody where you buy all your high-end electronics, at the Kroger parking lot.
Right.
And do you remember this? And he ended up talking to the actual pilot, and he said that, the guy had shown up the day before, wanted to do a photography flight. And but the weather was bad, so he said, okay, well, he came back a day or two later and said, okay, so we're ready to go. Where do you want to go? He goes like, well, let's just go that way or whatever. He's like, all right, what do you want to take a picture of? I mean, I got to know and everything. And he said, let's just go that way, whatever. Everything was very vague. He was saying he got circling over the Waller area, and he goes like, so what do you want to take a picture of? Because I think it's gonna be right over here. Yeah, right over here, circle up here. We get any higher? And he's like, wow, that's weird. All right, so he climbed up, he was only about 1,500 feet. And he said, yeah, I think, he goes, it's over there on your side. So the pilot looks and he goes, hang on, I got to get a piece of equipment. And he said that's when he reached back, and that's when he thinks that he undid his seatbelt. And he said, no, it's over here. Can you circle to the right? And when he circled to the right, door opened up and out he went. And that was, but yeah, I can imagine the controller was going like, what he said, like, was he wearing a parachute? No! That was that poor kid's first paying flight. He had just gotten his... I
remember that.
He became a flight instructor.
Right.
Like, he just passed the test and everything like a week prior. And that was
your first student. That's a bad look.
His first student and all, so...
Welcome to the world, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll always remember that.
Yeah.
Frank was talking about the FAM programs. And I wish they'd reinstate it because it's a great education for the controllers and the pilots. And I had a situation this one time. I'm in Orlando, coming back to Houston. And I go to check in at the gate. And the agent tells me, well, there's a pilot in the jump seat already. I said, oh, okay. Is it full in the back? She says, no, the plane's empty. And she points out this pilot over in the corner. And I go over and introduce myself. And I said, I understand you've got the jump seat right now. I'm trying to get back to Houston. I can't go in the back, but you can. And, you know, if it's going to cost a few dollars, I'm willing to walk up front and pay for it. And he looks at me, and he looks at me. He says, I don't know. I'm coming off a 3-day, and I'm a little tired. And I'm expecting him to break up laughing, okay? He's joking with me. And I realize he's not joking. And he's kind of young. I don't know if he shaves yet or not. But, you know, I stand there. I'm figuring at some point he's going to come up and say, gee, I'm sorry, let's get it straightened out. But no, I get to watch the airplane leave. But as he's going to get on down the jetway, I go over to him. And I take him by the arm, I take him aside and said, you are young. What you did today was not good. I want you to let some of your captains know what you did, and hopefully they'll straighten you out. And how many years ago was this that I still remember the young man? But I know, a week, 2 weeks after that, we had a line of weather running from Chicago down through Del Rio. And I'm up in TMU and I'm rerouting airplanes, you know, out to the west and down into Mexico and back up. And I'm rerouting this airplane and rerouting that airplane. But now here I get a flight plan on an airplane that was the company that this young man was flying on. And I said, you know, I've sent a lot of airplanes out to the west. I think I need to send him down to maybe Corpus and around to El Paso and up. And there were a few of those company reroutes that I had to do. And the only thing I can say to the aviation community is you don't want to piss off your friendly air traffic controller because we're going to get you.
You say report minimum fuel.
Well, I don't need that. Okay. I'm mic'd. I just wanted to join you all. The bag, I know it doesn't match the shoes. Sorry. My wife didn't dress me this morning. But you all are really amazing people, and it's well deserved that you made it this far to retirement. Just like Jack, Fred, Daniel's still flying. He's out there doing life flights, right? And he had that equipment to show us.
Yeah.
And if you hadn't had a chance, Daniel has 2 movies out there and a book. And here's the time to be a huckster, Daniel.
Yeah. Well, I flew the Apache helicopter in Afghanistan in 2006, and I didn't want to go back, so I filmed a lot of it and took a lot of pictures. When I got back, it was a lot of shooting. A whole lot of shooting. I was in the infamous Korengal Valley, which is where some people may recognize this. That was the valley that Operation Red Wings happened. Lone Survivor, that whole movie and all that. I was there 6 months after that happened. So from that, I ended up writing a book called South of Heaven, My Year in Afghanistan. Basically, it just chronicles how I got into Army aviation, but mainly my year in Afghanistan, flying the Apache helicopter in combat. Took a lot of videos with my own cameras. So
they were attached to your helicopter. It was the videos are amazing. You got to see the movie.
I ended up getting some of the footage is actually from the bottom, one of the landing gear on the Apache helicopter. So you can see the gun moving, the ground. You see the rockets shooting, see them hitting on the ground. I had it hooked up to my audio, so it's all actual audio, all actual footage in combat. People ask me how I got that, the camera footage outside of the helicopter there, and I said, well, you know, you have to support the local economy, so I hired this little Afghan kid, and I said, like, you hang on, brother, don't you lose my camera. And so he just got mad.
FAA approved?
Whenever I got going too fast, he'd just bang on the side of the helicopter. I'm like, all right, I'll slow down. But no, this is back actually when GoPros just started. It was not a GoPro camera. It was a security camera. But either way, it was some incredible footage, and it's real footage. So from my book, we ended up making that movie called Above the Best. And that, well, all the stories in there are from my book, but it actually has the combat missions from two perspectives. One from the guys on the ground, they had taken pictures and some videos and stuff. So on like the convoy mission, the convoy that we rescued, it was the guys on the ground.
You can get that on Amazon Prime?
Yeah, the title of the movie is called Above the Best. It's on Amazon Prime.
And your book too, right?
Yeah, and the book also.
So let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Can I get a couple of signed copies and I'll hawk them for you on our page?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if you want a signed copy of Above the Best,
Yeah.
we'll get Daniel to sign it and we'll sell it to you. So that was some great stories in there, some great movie footage. You've got to see it. I enjoyed it, and I was going to do some productions with him. I will do some productions with him later on, and we're so delighted to have him on Behind the Scope channel. And oh yeah, our T-shirts over there. Yeah. But Randall's from Washington, D.C. Rodney's from Washington, D.C. Airport, right?
Tower.
Tower. So you were in the same area that the American and that helicopter.
Yeah, same airport.
Well, did you have the same procedures going on back in 2015?
Same procedures, and I was talking to him earlier. If the helicopter had been at 200 feet and another half mile on the east bank of the Potomac River, it would have never happened.
Okay, so he was outside of his area of.
Well, the altitude was the main thing, because the CRJ was at, as I understand it, 325 feet, about a half mile final, flaps down, gear down, ready to land, and the helicopter flew right into him. But he was too high. The helicopter was too high.
And do you think that helicopter pilot had the other jet behind him in sight and not this guy?
He might have saw airplane, because he was circling, he was landing 3-3. I mean, the jet was landing 3-3, but the helicopter might have saw airplanes on final for runway 1.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I'm thinking.
And he had the night vision goggles
He had
on,
the night vision
right?
on, and
so
I
that
was
would really.
wondering about that too, because when the guy issued traffic,
that.
but generally when we issue traffic, we'll say one departing, one arrival. So normally you say traffic to your 1 o'clock will be departing runway 33, additional traffic 2 mile and trail. So like we said about helicopters being on corridors, but if that helicopter was on a corridor, which he was, and like if there was an issue about the traffic, quite often if we issued traffic to both and he deemed that the landing one was close, he would say, I would hold my position.
Yeah.
And the reason why they said maybe at 300 is only speculation, is that he lifted up to 300 because the departing traffic is going to kick back the, what are the eddies, right? And so to get out of that way.
Okay.
But I don't believe that both one were in sight. Like you said, they circled the other aircraft that lead to the runway that happened. Because helicopters are pilots that fly helicopters, they're so easy to work with. We love to work with them. Just having them hold a position, or they'll say it.
Yeah.
But when we say traffic in sight, all I heard was visual, with the
Did you
aircraft.
say hover there or back up?
We'll say hover. They can do whatever we need them to do. Keep on them out, or we can lift up, do whatever, go back. We love it.
So let me ask you another question, tower controllers, okay? Did you all look at the midway diagram, airport diagram? Do you think on the elite jet that crossed 3-3 center was actually thinking that he was crossing 3-3 left? Because that diagram is kind of confusing. It shows 3-3 right as 3-3 right, but also a taxiway.
So
it's very.
they've had close calls at Midway like that before.
Yeah, I know. It's just complicated to what the controller probably. He did a great job of reading back, catching the missed read back, and issuing the right instructions. But could the pilot have been confused about the runway setting set up by that diagram?
Yeah,
That's why he
what I was
crossed.
thinking about.
No, I don't know. We haven't done the forensics. We don't know the NTSB
Right.
report.
No, but the thing is, when we're going back to the familiarization, they used to put us controllers on the base ops vehicle so we can drive the field.
Oh.
Here's a blind spot. Here's a rough spot. This is where there's a lot of like here at Hooks. I used to work at Hooks. They call it the triangle. This little area where planes would all just start their run up and before they so. There was hot spots, and there's even videos out there on hot spots for each airport. And so they definitely, once you drive with the base ops person on the field, you're like, oh wow, it's like us right here trying to maneuver. You know, it's a whole different perspective from in the air to on the ground.
Well, it's good that they do that, and I always think that sometime during training you should get somebody to walk you through the airport to actually see how many people you could be working at a given time. One last thing, I heard what Fred said about don't upset the air traffic control people. When I was up at Chicago Center, and Ron, I don't know, I'm telling on you, but you got, this is a good story. Ron told me that up at the O'Hare, if a pilot upset them, they not only got to hold in the penalty box, they also got the, I guess you'd call it the scenic route, where you would taxi the wheels off an aircraft. And he literally taxied the wheels off a 747 by the inner, through the outer. So true. Don't upset those controllers. Just to Roger or say again or have it done, type it to me.
You said we're vindictive?
Not at all.
I don't think
We
that
are. We are not vindictive. We just want to get stuff done, so we'll just put you on hold for a little while.
Exactly. And then if we do give you the single route, it's probably because we probably taxied you somewhere, had you hold. Not that we've forgotten you, even though you might have been there for
You're keeping
8
it safe.
Not that you've forgotten that you were there for 8 minutes. But yeah, it's one good thing about working at the tower, because that's where it starts at in the tower, is when our friends are flying. And they're like, hey, you know, I gotta make this connection, and we're like way behind, we're number 25 in line, what can you do? And magic, they get the other taxi when it takes them all the way up to the front. I just heard that.
Well, it's first come, first serve, right?
I've done that.
As far as I know.
Always first come first. I just heard that once happen one time.
Oh, that reminded me of one more thing when I used to fly. I used to fly out of Hooks, 182. I was a member of the Southwest Flying Club. And when I was a controller, I would always call up, you know, hey, you used to send us, you know. After I became a manager, never called. I would listen, but I wouldn't call anymore. Never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But
We're all human,
yeah.
and we have personalities.
Yeah.
And as much as we have controller personalities, there are pilots, and there are pilots out there that love controllers, and there are pilots out there that hate controllers.
Who is the guy that everybody, as soon as you mention their name? Slim
Cox.
Yeah. You have a mic?
Huh?
Are you mic?
No, he doesn't.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, tell us, say it again, Fred.
Okay. Personalities on the pilot side and the controller side. And there are good and bad. And there are certain controllers that don't like certain air companies, certain pilots, and there are certain pilots that hate controllers. I remember I've heard a TWA, you know, one of our guys got on an airplane with his family in the back.
Excuse me.
And this captain was all upset, and he throws the controller off the airplane, making an announcement about who he is, taking him off the airplane, and his family, okay? We got to hear about that before the sun went down. And if you think those white and red striped airplanes didn't get a few extra turns in a holding pattern or get to be number 3 as opposed to number 1, you can't mess up or piss off your friendly air traffic controller. Now, there were certain pilots that were the elite of hatred. And when I was at the academy, here I am walking through our office one day, and there's a controller from Panama, one from Atlanta, and one from LA. And they're talking in the corner. And I hear them talking just out of the corner of my ear, and I stop. And I said, you're talking about Cox, aren't you? He says, yeah, how'd you know? I say, we hate him in New York, too. And I mean, I saw that man, and I don't know what, but he would take a controller and crumple him up like a piece of paper. You'd be buried in airplanes, talking a mile a minute, give him a clearance, and he'd want you to read off all the radials and instructions, okay? Yeah, we'll do it, but that's going to back the traffic way up. And when Eastern 401 crashed in the Everglades, we thought Cox was flying at TriStar.
No.
And after the 3 to 11 shift, we all went out and had a party. Not for Cox, but we felt bad for the alligator. Probably ate him. Probably got poisoned. Yeah.
But no, that is very true. With the pilot and the controller is working out of Peachtree DeKalb and Georgia 1. I happen to talk fast anyway, and I taxed on the runway 17 via taxiway Alpha, turned right on Bravo, and he came back. He says, "Ma'am, this is Georgia 1, and in Georgia we don't talk fast, so you're gonna have to read that back to me." So I've learned my lesson. Okay.
We had one wonderful female controller working, and she was working this American this one time, and she was busy, and she turned him to the west and let him go direct, and she turned him to the west and let him go direct, and finally she's turned him over to approach, and she apologizes, for all the vectors. He says, "It's okay, I don't know how to cook either."
Yeah, you have one.
I was working up the front desk at TMU this one day, and we had a guy who was a Saudi national. Called, I think he's flying for the Prince. Saudi. Remember this one?
Yeah, I do.
No, anyway. So this guy calls up. And he says, "My call sign is such and such and such, and I'm flying from Houston Intercontinental to someplace in New York, to LaGuardia Airport," and gives the whole route. He says, "I request that all male controllers, no female controllers," right? And we said, "Roger, have your request." Got off the phone. So that made it fun. Okay, so we called Houston Approach. We called Fort Worth Center. Everybody down the line had it all arranged. So from the minute he started on ground control all the way to where he landed in New York, every single one of the controllers was female.
Awesome. That's it outside.
Wow. And it was like, okay,
This is what
pal,
you get.
you may be able to get away with that in Riyadh, but around here, you don't run the show. Yeah.
Dana and I worked together at Waco, and they had these ram flights that they test the planes and also other planes that they modified with gold and all this for the Sultan and the King and the Prince of somewhere else. So they would fly in to get the aircraft when it's ready, and our manager was a female. Dana and I were female. And when he came in, he didn't want to listen to my instruction. I'm like, "Say again, request male air traffic controller." What?
Wow.
I was like, "What? No."
Wow.
And so, I told Dana, she tells the manager too, and like, "Can you believe this plane's like not wanting to," what he said? She goes, she put Dana on another position. I was on a position. Same thing. It's like, "Let me know when he flies out because we're going to have women on there." But they literally said that. That's true.
Where was he from?
Well, they'd come from somewhere in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
It was a prince and sultan or whatever. They would modify their planes all sorts of the way. And actually, I was in the Air Force, blessing in disguise, I guess you can call it. So I'm being deployed for Desert Storm, one of those. And I was going to be sent to Saudi. Well, then all of a sudden they're like, "No, you're going to Spain." We're in the middle of the air. And I'm like, "What?" So there was a female air traffic controller. I know her name is Becky. Was the first female air traffic controller over there, and two planes almost collided because they refused in that country to listen to women air traffic control. So then they didn't send me there. I got sent to Morón, Spain during the war, and I controlled traffic out of there. But I love Spain, so I don't complain. But they did that.
Wow.
See what we go through, Joe? I mean, this is what we go through. We had Sandy Kent in Lake Charles was working traffic. Mm-hmm. And, she has a tendency to kind of get hyped. No. And yes, right? No. So she's telling her, "I want you, United so-and-so, you do this, and Continental, I want you to, and she was going back and forth, and American. And then when she switched to American, that they were going back and forth, and then United pops up, "Can I get a frequency change too?" Because everybody wanted to get off the frequency. So, yeah, we have our days. But, I think that working with all the controllers I've worked with, from every facility I've been to, have been a really good thing for me. You meet friends everywhere, like I said, meeting Yaya. So go over to Dubai, you can hang out with controllers that I met that worked there, and Bill Hall, them. So it's been a good thing.
Bill Hall.
Bill Hall, yeah, he's working over at Ellington right now as a contract.
I was in the Air Force with a Bill Hall.
Well, Bill Hall.
Air Force. Is that him?
He's retired out of Intercontinental.
You have his number?
Yeah, I think I do have his number. I do. I have his number. So, yeah. But you did a movie and you didn't ask me to be in it. I was kind of like, what was really going on there? It's like, I did acting like in first grade. Yeah. Okay, here you go.
Well, like Dana says, we have our days. Every controller has them. Early in my training again, shortly after I cleared that F4 to go supersonic.
That's the tower number?
Do you remember the slant OK option that we have?
Thank you. Yeah. Hold on.
Which can only lead to trouble, and you're trained early. Don't use slant OK. If you're using slant OK, something's wrong, and you're not recognizing.
Got it. Thank you.
But for those of you who don't know, a slant OK function in the computer allows me in working my sector to take control of an airplane in Steve's sector and change anything in the flight plan, data block, steal it, whatever I felt I needed to do. But one day this plane, I cleared him for clearance, and I cleared him for approach at some little podunk airport, and he canceled IFR, and so I went to remove the flight plan. So I typed in the CID, 3-letter identifier for the computer in that airplane, and went on about my business for about 30 seconds. Then I looked over, and that data block is still there. Well, the data block is there. I need to remove it. So I did remove it, like I said, and then I looked over it, and it's still there. So suddenly I realized I have removed somebody else's airplane from this system. Ooh. Somewhere in this building. So the stampede I caused with the F4 to going supersonic is now in the center. And there are people running around saying, every scope, did you lose an airplane? Did you lose an airplane? Did you lose an airplane? It took about 45 seconds, and we found the sector that, yeah, where's so-and-so? So they got it reinstated, and I had another appointment with my supervisor and my OM. Wow. Finally, this stuff sunk into my head, and I became a decent controller. Some people will argue with that, but I'm sticking to my guns. Exciting job. Pay attention, listen to what they tell you, and you'll probably survive. Somebody said, Steve said that the academy was most stressful, and it really was, and that he didn't think working traffic was that stressful. I didn't either. After I retired, however, 1 month after I retired, I came to the realization that I'm no longer having headaches. I don't have headaches anymore. So I think it's stressful. It's just a subtle stress, and underneath the current, it's there, but it's a fun, positive stress.
I gotta say though, if I can, that as a passenger and not involved, I really have no experience other than that. To hear you say it was more stressful in the academy than it is when you're doing your job makes me feel really good, because the impression we have is everybody's just just crazy and high strung. But when you say it's not, I feel a lot better, because then I know, all right, I'm in good hands. I feel safe. I feel like no problem. You guys have it, right? And then I feel like, all right, I know I'm not in the hands of someone or people who are. You enjoy it. It's easy. You're very good at it. I have no problem getting on that plane, and that makes me feel good. It really does, because I love to fly, and I love to know that I'm in really good hands.
A lot of times my stress came from management. Pilot's no problem, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly, yeah. Well, thanks, guys and ladies, and I just, I tell you, I'm from Midwest, that's me. I just say thank you, and I'm really glad to be able to just be a part of it. I learn so much from you. I hear the stories, I hear your knowledge. It just makes me appreciate it even more. I do. I love it. If it flies, I love it. So just want to say thank you very, very much to let me be a part of it, because I wouldn't have any other opportunity unless Robert gave me the opportunity. So thanks.
Thank you.
You are very welcome. You are very welcome.
I got one more classic story.
Oh,
that's cut. We're done? We're done. We'll come back.
Hey, I want to take a picture of you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to take a picture. Selfie.
Oh, no, absolutely. This is fun.
How y'all doing?
Yeah.
Good to see you. I'm glad y'all made it.
I gotta get this.
Some of my homegirls. My homegirls.
You did enjoy it.
Tell your friends.